Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the Frankie Pullian case. It is a solved case that has been on my mind for quite a while now, so I decided to just film the video today. It's a very sad story, but it is the type of story that kind of gives you a little bit of faith in the justice system, so a bit of a 50-50 there. It also includes quite a lot of forensics, which is my favorite part of any true crime case. So if you're into that, then please keep watching. Before I get started, please remember to like and subscribe. It makes a huge difference to me and my channel. And without further ado, let's just get started. This case happened back in 1980 in New Jersey, more specifically Paterson, New Jersey, which is a town just outside of New York City. And at 628 Market Street was a funeral home run by E. Lee White. It was one of the more successful Black funeral homes in New Jersey in that area, and at that very funeral home worked Frankie Pullian. Frankie Pullian was born on the 21st of August 1951, making him about 28 years old in 1980. He joined the US military after graduating high school, but was discharged after 7 months for neurological impairment. Basically, he couldn't pass certain tests to complete his service, so he was discharged a couple of months in, and he ended up getting a job at E. Lee White's funeral home. He was mostly hired to run errands and help around. He would clean and wash and prepare the ceremonial vehicles, so mostly the limousines and the hearse, and he made between $7,500 and $10,000 a year. Though Frankie did not have any close family in New Jersey, in Paterson, New Jersey, he did look up to Mr. White as some sort of father figure. On April 8th, 1980, Frankie Pullian was found lifeless under a Ford Maverick in a dead-end street. The car had been abandoned, and it looked like whoever had hit Frankie had just fled the scene and left the vehicle behind. Police quickly discovered that the vehicle had been stolen a month prior and actually belonged to a retired policeman who was quite elderly and had an alibi for that day and that night, so it definitely wasn't going to be this retired policeman whose car was stolen. So police had to dig a little bit further to find out who stole that car and who killed Frankie. The first thing police wanted to find out was when the accident happened. Frankie was discovered at 6 a.m. on April 8th, and police decided to check the local police patrolman's records to find out if they had seen anything that night and if they could narrow down when the accident happened. And they noted that a patrol unit passed that very street at 4 in the morning and did not notice the car or Frankie. So it is estimated that the accident happened between 4 and 6 a.m. that day, which is extremely late in the night, but also very early in the morning. It's not a time you would expect anyone to be walking about. So what was Frankie doing outside at that time in that street? Frankie was immediately brought into E. Lee White's funeral home, which is where Frankie also used to work. And an autopsy was performed, which is a very routine procedure when there is any sudden death or accident. And I know where I live, or nowadays, these autopsies would happen in a city morgue or a hospital. It wouldn't happen in a funeral home's morgue. But back in the 80s, not every town and not every area had a centralized morgue, so funeral homes would hold certain contracts to act as a centralized morgue to perform the autopsies. So Frankie Pullian's autopsy happened in E. Lee White's funeral home. The medical examiner determined that Frankie had died of massive trauma due to the hit-and-run accident and determined the cause of death to be accidental. Of course, police looked for fingerprints. However, the steering wheel had been wiped clean, leaving police with no leads. However, it did leave them with quite a few questions because, as I stated previously, the car Frankie was found under was in a dead-end street facing outwards, meaning that the car was making its way out of the dead-end street, not going into the dead-end street. And police couldn't quite figure out how any car would be able to gain enough speed to fatally injure a pedestrian coming out of a dead-end street. Usually if you're coming out of a dead-end street, you would drive quite slowly, and there just wasn't a lot of distance to gain a lot of speed. So police were a little bit confused about that. And although police couldn't find any fingerprints on the steering wheel, they did find blood on the inside of the windshield and the inside trim of the passenger door, which is a very odd location for blood when a hit and run is involved. If there is any blood involved, it would be on the outside of the car, not on the inside. Instead of accepting the hit and run accident as Frankie's cause of death, police got very suspicious and they felt like the accident scene was very staged. To help police figure out if this hit and run was Frankie's cause of death, they brought in Walter Suhaka, an expert accident reconstructionist who is nationally acclaimed. Walter was given pictures taken by police on the day of the accident. And luckily, police had taken quite a few pictures. And Walter Suhaka said that it's what he didn't see in the pictures that was concerning to him. He couldn't see any evidence of skid marks, which, you know, if you're about to hit someone or if you've just hit someone with a vehicle, the first thing you would do is just slam the brakes, which would leave a skid mark on the road. He also saw no damage to the front of the car and noticed that Frankie's position under the car was very unusual. Frankie was about 5'8" and weighed 144 pounds, and if a vehicle were to hit someone of that size and height, the person would hit the hood of the car, possibly the windshield as well, and then roll over to the side. They wouldn't be underneath the car. What was odd as well was that they had found blood in the tire tracks from the rear tires of the car. However, if Frankie had been run over by a car and lodged between the front wheels and the back wheels, how could there be any blood coming from the rear tires? It just didn't seem to make any sense. There wouldn't be any blood behind the car. If anything, it would be between Frankie and the front wheels. Walter confirmed that the presence of blood inside the car was definitely suspicious and did not match up a car accident or a hit and run. There would be no way for blood to be inside the car, or more specifically inside the windshield. And he also noticed that Frankie's clothes were next to him, so they found Frankie's coat next to him. And they also found the watch face that he had, but none of the straps. They couldn't find any straps to go with the rest of the watch. And that, again, would not happen in a hit and run accident. You wouldn't have your coat knocked off you and placed next to you. So a lot of things weren't adding up, and Walter got very suspicious, just like police did. Walter requested an exhumation of Frankie's body to find out what the actual injuries were. He didn't feel like the initial autopsy was thorough enough, and as you can imagine, exhuming someone's body is not something that is quick or easy to arrange. It took 3 years of legal battle to get the authorization to exhume Frankie's body. The state coroner's office assigned Dr. Geeta Natarajan to conduct the second autopsy. She was a forensic pathologist, and she immediately noticed that there were no external injuries to Frankie's body. There were no bruises, no broken limbs, no brush burn, which is a burn that would happen from a moving object, such as being dragged by a car. No external injuries were visible, and that definitely wasn't consistent with the type of injuries you would see from a hit and run accident or from a car accident. He had none of those. What she did find were 4 linear fractures on the back of his skull. She found a very small area with a depressed circular fracture that was not mentioned in the initial autopsy. The fracture even had wood splinters around the wound, and wood is not something you would find underneath a car or on the hood of a car. So what was it doing there? Why was this not documented the first time around? It seemed incredible that the first autopsy would miss something huge like this, but Dr. Natarajan quickly realized that the medical examiner who performed the initial autopsy wasn't a pathologist. He was literally just a general practitioner who did the best he could under the circumstances, but he did not have any training in performing any autopsies. Dr. Natarajan also found out that the doctor who performed the initial autopsy never really asked around for any information. He didn't speak to the police officers, he didn't look at the accident scene pictures, he didn't look at anything like that. He just seemed to accept the hit and run scenario, but what is very alarming is that when he was requested to come over to perform the autopsy, Ely White told him that he would just go ahead and get started on the examination. Dr. Natarajan changed the cause of death from accidental to murder and concluded that Frankie had been murdered by a blunt instrument before the hit-and-run accident scene was staged. Also, the blood found inside the car was concluded to be a match to Frankie Pullian's blood type, which was type O. Now that investigators knew that Frankie Pullian had been murdered, they needed to find a motive in order to find a suspect. And they looked into Frankie's life, but he didn't have any relatives nearby. He didn't make a lot of money. He made under $10,000 a year. Who could possibly want him dead, and why? Police took a closer look into Frankie's affairs and found out that he had 9 separate life insurance policies in his name, with a total payout coming close to $1 million. Additionally, the policies contained an accidental death provision, meaning that if Frankie Pullian were to die in an accident, there would be an added $350,000 payout. The insurance premiums added up to $3,500 a year, which is almost half of Frankie's yearly salary. So who would benefit from this? Because Frankie's not about to spend half of his very low income on 9 separate insurance policies that he would never benefit from, and he wasn't in a relationship. He didn't have any close relatives who could possibly benefit from this, so who would stand to benefit almost $1 million? Police discovered that there were 4 beneficiaries to these policies: Ely White, Frankie's former boss, Erna Boone, Lawrence Scott, and William Brown. Now, Erna Boone was stated as Ely White's sister. However, he did not have any sisters, and it turns out that Erna Boone was Erna White's maiden name, and Erna White was, of course, Ely White's wife. So she had used her maiden name on the form and claimed to be his sister. Lawrence Scott and William Brown were stated as Ely White's cousins. However, they were actually just acquaintances or friends. And get this, the last policy was taken only days before Frankie's death. Naturally, the insurance company initiated an investigation into this to find out if there was any possible insurance fraud going on, and police were just as interested. In order for Frankie Pullian to take out an insurance policy in his name, he would need to undergo a physical examination, and the doctor declared Frankie as fit and healthy. Now, if you remember, Frankie was actually discharged from the US military for neurological impairment, so how could the doctor miss that and claim Frankie to be healthy and fit? The doctor who performed Frankie's physical examination told police that Frankie had come into the appointment with cue cards, little handwritten notes along with him, and whenever the doctor would ask him questions about his personal life or his lifestyle, he would look at the notes before answering. Somehow this was no cause of concern for the doctor. However, police immediately knew that there was no way Frankie was attending that medical examination and that someone must have impersonated him. An expert compared the signatures on the policies to Frankie's known handwriting samples, and it was concluded that they were forgeries. Police obviously confronted Ely White about these policies in Frankie's name, and although he confirmed to having purchased them, he denied any involvement with Frankie's death. Unfortunately for Mr. White, a witness came forward to tell police that they had seen the stolen Ford Maverick outside of Mr. White's funeral home the night before. Officials believe that in the 8 months leading up to Frankie's death, Ely White, Edna White, Lawrence Scott, and William Brown forged signatures on the life insurance policies and had someone impersonate Frankie Pullian for the physical examination. Police believe that Ely White was the ringleader in this crime and that he had possibly been planning it for years, even before hiring Frankie Pullian as the ideal victim. Based on the evidence, Frankie was somehow lured into the stolen Ford Maverick before being struck on the back of the skull and slowly run over by the stolen vehicle to make it look like a hit-and-run accident. Ely White knew that Frankie's body would automatically be sent to his own funeral home for the autopsy, and that the medical examiner involved in the autopsy would not question Ely White starting the examination before his arrival. What's quite interesting is that none of the investigators seem to be aware that this funeral home and Mr. White himself had been involved in a little bit of a scandal in 1975. Back in summer 1975, Ely White had been stripped of his certification needed for him to conduct funerals, because he was marking caskets up to 4 times their wholesale cost, which is a highly unethical business practice. His certification was revoked permanently, however, somehow in the next few years he managed to gain trust again and continue to run his funeral home. On January 18th, 1985, Ely White, Lawrence Scott, and William Brown were all charged with first-degree murder and insurance fraud. Each of them got given life sentences, though Ely White would be eligible for parole after 25 years and Lawrence Scott would be eligible for parole after 15 years. And although there is no physical evidence tying them to Frankie's murder, the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming, and it was established that all 3 men had conspired to murder for profit. Unfortunately, nobody actually knows who killed Frankie Pullian. None of them had come forward to give a name or to accuse another person, which does make me believe that they were all equally involved, so they would gain nothing from accusing someone else because they are all involved. If you remember, there was a 4th beneficiary on these policies, which was Erna White, Ely White's wife, and she is not believed to have been involved in the murders, so she got away with just being placed on probation. She was a public teacher at the time, so I'm not sure if this probation affected her career at all. However, she is believed to still be alive, and she is in her late 70s, early 80s. Lawrence Scott got released from jail in 2001, got reincarcerated later that same year. I am not sure if he is currently out of jail. Very likely he is. And William Brown is believed to be out of jail by now, though it is very difficult to find any information about him because his name is so common. Now, when it comes to Mr. White, he got an extra 5 years added to his sentence in 1990 after bribing a fellow inmate to come forward and take responsibility for Frankie Pullian's murder. He had offered him a sports car as well as cash, and I find that very interesting because I don't understand how you could bribe a fellow inmate to come forward for a murder they didn't commit with cash and a sports car, because surely if they were to come forward, admit to a crime they didn't commit, and then let's assume that they would get charged for this crime that they're confessing about, then how would they benefit from the sports car and the cash? It seems like a very poor deal, but however, the inmate came forward and Ely White got an extra 5 years added to his sentence because of this. He was actually denied parole back in 2016 due to lack of rehabilitative progress. That is a difficult word. And he passed away in May 2019 in Washington, D.C. It's always very sad to me to look at these cases and try and find information about someone who has been murdered or a victim of a crime, and the only information you can find is the actual murder investigation. I'm not sure if Frankie had any dreams or aspirations. Unfortunately, he didn't even get to celebrate his 30th birthday. And I find it absolutely sickening that anyone would murder for any amount of money. However, in this case, I think it is important to focus on the fact that this could easily have been completely dismissed. This could have just been ruled as a hit and run. There would have been no justice for Frankie. However, it is nice to see that police were suspicious from the get-go and really fought to find out what actually happened and arrest the people involved. I guess you always hear about some cases that were botched, or where the victim never stood a chance because police did such a horrible job, or that nobody cared, or they didn't act fast enough. So it's nice to see in this case that they really did everything they could to find out what happened and try and get justice in Frankie's name. But that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Please comment down below if there's any cases you would like me to cover. Before you click out, please remember to like and subscribe. It makes my day. And that's it. See you in the next video. Bye.